Good morning from Warsaw. My name is Michael Dembinski. I am the Chief Advisor of the British-Polish Chamber of Commerce. Today we're going to be looking at the interaction in the world of IT outsourcing between the UK and Poland. We start off with the premise that the UK is short of some 60,000 programmers, coders, developers, and that there is a vast amount of IT work to be done in the UK. One of the trends that we can see across the world of business is that COVID has accelerated many areas, many directions, many trends that have already been visible in the world of business. They're just happening faster. Certainly this is true of IT. We can see this vast move towards working from home, which is all driven by IT. We can see this vast move towards e-commerce, which is driven by IT. Businesses, if they are to survive, if they are to prosper in the future, know that they need to do this using IT tools. The question is, are there enough good people in the UK who can deliver those IT projects that can drive businesses forward? Our experience as the British-Polish Chamber of Commerce is that British companies have already been looking at Poland for many years as a source of IT talent, either by setting up IT hubs in Poland, and we have some good examples of FTSE 100 companies like Hargreaves Lansdown or Sage, Standard Chartered Bank, who have set up dedicated IT hubs here in Warsaw. But we can also see the outsourcing of innovation of companies from the UK saying to a company in Poland, here is our business problem. Can you take this away and solve it for us? And this is an interesting trend as well. One of our member companies that's particularly strong in this is Future Processing from Gliwice. It's a company that employs about 900 developers. And about 2/3 of all the work they do is for the UK. And one of the things that we have seen over the years is that British companies that have had experience in Poland have said, yes, we are very happy with the quality of IT work, that if anything, Poles tend to under-promise and over-deliver. However, one of the things that we see as we approach British companies is that they feel that Poles undersell themselves, that there isn't enough razzmatazz, that there isn't enough showmanship, whereas Americans, Indians are quite pushy. The Polish IT firms, when it comes to entering cooperation with British partners, find themselves a little bit ill at ease. So these are the things that we'd like to talk about with Russell Dalgleish, Scottish Business Network, and Angus Kidd, who works with organizations like Genpact and Caspian. So I'd like to start off by talking, let's hear from Angus about his experiences working with Polish IT. How has that worked out in practice? Angus.
Thanks, Michael. Very, very good introduction. Morning, everybody. To briefly introduce myself, I actually headed up Credit Suisse in Poland for about 4 years. Large operation in Wrocław and also in Warsaw. Within that footprint of about 5,000 staff, Credit Suisse employed about 2,000 IT people, mostly in Wrocław and some in Warsaw. So good experience over 4 years of actually, hiring, developing, managing, etc., a large, diverse IT workforce. Look, my experience over that 4 years was the technical expertise was phenomenal, and that really didn't matter to an extent to which university they'd studied at or where they'd actually worked previously. We found the technical ability hugely impressive. I must apologize, there's some background noise with me here, which may continue for a few minutes. So it may be worth Russell just stepping in if he's okay, and I can talk again and if the noise is causing a problem.
Are you having some building work done, working from home.
Yes. And I was trying to get into a different room to avoid the noise, but I can't. So I must apologise. It should finish very shortly. I'll keep going.
Are you in Poland at the moment or in the UK?
I'm in the UK. After my 4 years in Poland, I moved. I'm now based in North England, in a city called Newcastle, which is my original hometown.
Okay.
So the work my experience with Polish IT is broad and deep, from hiring, recruiting, training, as I mentioned. Look, I think everything you said, Michael, I think is pretty fair. The technical expertise is phenomenal. It really is. You know, some of the things that the guys used to develop and work on in their own spare time was quite amazing. That didn't always help an offshore manager in London or Zurich, for example, who had certain set of tasks and certain responsibilities, because we found the Polish guys were hugely creative in terms of what they wanted to do. The desire to learn, the desire to continue to improve was always there. So it was hugely impressive. But I also do agree with your point that to some extent slightly understated. So a good example I would give is we were doing a piece of work or a project, and I would say, right, where's the work got to? And I was given a few nods and yes, it's been done. But once I started to ask questions, what I always found was it wasn't just that one task had been delivered. There'd been 4 or 5 tasks around that, which had also been done as well, as part of making sure they're doing a thorough job. So certainly very thorough engineering of any piece of work. Occasionally that was maybe a little too much. It was a little too much than was required. But the product that was then delivered was always solid. You knew you could rely on that product. So very positive experience. Look, I think the challenge in Poland with IT, with tech talent is, there's a bit of a gap. So we broadened our recruitment drives beyond Poland. We were bringing a lot of staff, IT staff, particularly from Ukraine, Spain, Portugal, Italy. So by the end of the 2000 or so IT workforce working in Poland, we probably had 15 to 20 different nationalities of people. And the second largest nationality after Polish was actually Indian. We had a lot of Indian developers who relocated because of the interesting work that was available. So skills are there. To your point in terms of how that perhaps relates to UK and where there may be some opportunities there, if you like. Look, I think attracting people to the UK is maybe slightly more difficult than it perhaps was a few years ago with Brexit, etc. I certainly noticed that in my monthly welcome talks to all the new joiners each month in our office. Yeah, my first 2 years in Poland, I didn't meet anybody who was a returning Pole to Poland. Post Brexit, every month I would speak to at least 2 or 3 people who had decided it was time to move back to Poland for a good reason, family reason, better jobs that were available, etc. That's great, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. However, what it does mean is there's increasing gap in the UK, if you like, of all the work that those people were doing in the UK. Well, who do you get to then take over that piece of work? So yeah, I think from a talent point of view, it's there, but there's a scarcity, whether it's in Poland or whether it's in the UK.
Russell, can you talk us through an introduction as to your experiences with IT in Poland?
Thank you very much. So I'm calling you today from just outside the city of Edinburgh in Scotland in the north of the UK. My background or my career has been primarily in technology. We had the first cloud-based HR solution in 2000, I think. So we've been there from the very start, very heavily involved in technology. Scotland itself is a thriving technology scene. Scotland's skill set tends to be based around innovation. And then when it comes to the actual development of that innovation, that's where we reach a bit of a bottleneck regarding skills. My experience in Eastern Europe has been, or Eastern and Southern Europe, has been based around about primarily outsourcing of tasks, which would then be delivered by either a part of the company, which was set up in the local region, be it Kiev or in Poland or in Croatia, or in Serbia, actually. So So those different regions. However, we think the world today is a very different place. So what's happened since the pandemic struck has been, the primary focus has been, of course, on the health concern. But actually on the back of that, we've seen the world start to take a significant step in digital transformation. So I'm speaking to lawyers in the UK who'll tell me they've achieved more in 4 months under lockdown than they would have in 4 years of digital transformation. Yes. What this has led to is an acceleration in the demand for digital skills, as we've seen these projects advance. In Scotland, we have a real focus on data. So it's been an area of major investment, and we have a large investment in encouraging teams to make better use of the data within their companies. So that's led to a burgeoning in data science degrees across Scotland. However, when we look at the way that projects are being delivered today, so I spent some of my background in engineering, whereby we would run global projects 24 hours a day in the design phase. And we're now starting to see that come into technology. But what it means is where you are is no longer that significant. It's your skills, your capability, and your ability to communicate, which is the absolute core of this. So we will see cross-nationality development teams, but perhaps with members of that team who've never met. I think we're going to see a huge burgeoning in entrepreneurialism. So individuals starting up on their own or with someone else, and being part of an integrated team, but based across the world. We're also going to see employees hired in Poland who may never come to the UK, because we're all communicating through this digital mechanism, and the world's not going to go back from this. We will change next year, but the digital, in particular, this form of communication is going to burgeon. So what's also interesting is to see the part of the region of the world we're looking at the moment, particularly on the EU border. So as the UK steps back from the EU, it allows a renegotiation of trade and relationships with all the countries in the world. So there are countries that the UK has not looked at to provide with technology talent because they've been out with the EU, which are now going to be of great interest to us. What we're also seeing is that the cultural relationships between different parts of the world are incredibly important. So Scotland's had a relationship with, say, Poland for 400 years. However, after the Second World War, there was a huge enlargement in the Polish community in Scotland. And to this day, we have Polish societies, Polish groups right across the country. So there's a strong relationship there. So I think at the moment, what we're trying to do as a planet is trying to work out how we know the opportunity, we can see the need, but it's how to make it work, which is the challenge. And it's going to be about visibility. So I have a project at the moment. I'm going to, who am I going to give the work to? I'm going to have to make a decision. So how do I find a company in Poland? How do I find a company in Ukraine or in Belarus? How do I do that? So making yourselves visible is important. The subject of language has become much more critical. So during this pandemic, speakers of non-transnational languages are really finding it a lot tougher. So if I speak to clients in the who are Arabic speakers, you know, look at the software tools that they have available to them is a microset of what are available to English-speaking developers. So I think what's happened as well is language has become even more important. And it's not only language, but it's also the ability to communicate. So not just knowing the words, but knowing how to initiate change. And we see what we're seeing happening is partnerships. So never has there been more collaboration witnessed on the earth since this pandemic has arrived. So if we part the politicians, this is a shared experience we've all had, and it's led to collaboration based on trust between different organizations and between different individuals. So when I was asked to appear on this talk, there was no hesitation from me because I knew it was going to be spreading a positive message. So I think we're going to see an increase in activity globally, but you're going to have to position yourself. So you're going to have to be visible, whereby I know you're good to come to. And it's not about your technology skills. It's about your proven ability to deliver in a trusted way. So case studies, for example, are incredibly important. I don't want to know how many different languages how many different coding languages someone can code in. I want to know that they've done these 3 projects, and here are the 5-star references from the three clients. So our world migrates almost into an Amazon marketplace, where it's that ability to understand this is someone it's worth taking a risk to work with. And that's the challenge for all of us in this world, is getting on the radar to get these opportunities.
That's certainly something that we find that Polish companies, when they go to the UK, we've had, over the years, we've had a number of missions that we've taken Polish IT companies to London.
Sorry, could I interrupt? Is it, when you say coming to the UK, do you mean just coming to London?
Sadly, yes.
Yeah.
Sadly, that
so
is
the secret for everyone on the call is there's a whole country out there beyond London.
Yeah,
London's about to become a transformational place because of this opportunity we've seen for a lot of the money to migrate to the suburbs. So I would seriously advise looking at other cities such as Manchester, Birmingham, Newcastle, Edinburgh.
Yeah, I'd absolutely take your point. It's just that much easier to organise these things in London, where we have a network there. We have the Polish embassy, and we have member companies tend to have their headquarters in London. So, but I certainly take your point. Edinburgh certainly has a well-developed entrepreneur community, business angels, venture capital, private equity. There are funds available. There is a talent pool. Without a doubt. And I think that that is something that the Scottish government, now that it has in place at the British Embassy in Warsaw, a dedicated person to sell Scotland, I think that message certainly should be made loud and clear, that Edinburgh is very much an alternative to London.
So just to come back on that, so this is I'll just jump in there actually, Russell.
Yeah,
I'll just jump in there quickly. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There's London and there's the rest of the UK, and I think people generally don't seem to recognise there is the rest of the UK beyond London. So the talent around tech and fintech and what have you is very strong in Scotland, Edinburgh, Glasgow, north of England, Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, and other places as well. And I think it's absolutely right, Michael, to consider looking beyond London, because what you typically will find is a more flexible workforce and with as good skills, but more flexible outside of London. And as Russell was saying before, the physical location you're actually based in terms of doing work it's become so less important now, within reason for a lot of things, that actually if you're based in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Newcastle, that shouldn't matter anymore, quite frankly, with the technology now.
Yeah, that's something that I want to come back to, and that's the working from home phenomenon. We did an event with the city of Kraków, promoting Kraków as an inward investment destination for shared services and IT hubs. We did this together with PwC, and the guy responsible for shared services consulting in PwC was talking about the lockdown experience globally, and saying that countries like India and Philippines rather struggled with it, whereas Central and Eastern Europe passed the test with flying colours. That it's down to infrastructure, it's down to IT, and it's down to the physical working conditions of the rooms and the number of people that you've got in your household that allow you to work effectively from home. And from that point of view, as we were saying, Russell, that we are becoming a world which is geography independent, but at the same time, we still do need to have those conditions for work. We do need to have the IT infrastructure and the space from which we can work. How do you see, the working from home experience taken on a global perspective? Angus, I know that, Genpact does a lot of work in the Far East and in India. How does working from home compare, looking at country by country?
Yeah, sure. I can give two perspectives on that. After my 20 plus years at Credit Suisse, for which from Poland, I moved back to the UK just over a year ago, as I mentioned, based in Newcastle. I mean, I'll give a comment on how it's changed perception of fintech firms around Newcastle in terms of location and working from home. And then I'll also give a context for that more international reach, if you like. Some of the fintechs in Newcastle I've been helping and working with and developing over the last year or so. Caspian is one in particular, a very good financial crime software package. These are 40 people based in Newcastle, They have a financial crime software in terms of how they help banks monitor transactions. Their transaction monitoring software is several times better than most of the top tier banks. And yet these are 40 people based in an office in Newcastle. Their challenge has been getting their message out to the world, if you like, of just how good they are. I've been helping them with that. They always struggle to find talent locally of the right quality enough in the sort of northeast region of the UK. Since lockdown, they've completely changed their recruitment process because none of their staff have been in the office in 6 months, and now they're very, very open to having contractors, permanent staff based anywhere in the UK and even overseas as well. Because as long as you have strong broadband connection, ability to use things like Teams and Zoom and what have you, 90% of what you need to do can be done. So onboarding new staff, for example, that's been hugely progressed and promoted and developed in the last 6 months. So now it can be done seamlessly and done remotely. So I think it's changed perception of small tech firms in the UK of actually how they can better leverage tech talent overseas and different locations. It's probably one thing I would say. It gives them access to a broader range of technical skills as well. And maybe certain languages that are more prevalent in certain countries, computer languages which are more prevalent in certain countries. So I think it's opened people's eyes in the UK, I would say, certainly Newcastle, to what you can source overseas because it doesn't matter where that person sits. Secondly, I'm also doing some advisory work with a company called Genpact, which is a consulting firm that's similar in size and nature to Accenture, I would say. They have about a 50,000 person managed service operation that's run out of India, covering technology and operations. They have another 30,000, 40,000 staff in Europe and the US who are more on the consulting transformation side. For their managed service operations in India, they already had very strong working from home practices, because one of the things they focused on, and certainly in India, was not necessarily having these large 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 person offices. That's not been one of their company culture for a while. So for them, actually, because they've been open to using work from home practices for several years, they could switch pretty seamlessly into the COVID situation last 6 months. Other large vendors in India, for example, probably weren't as advanced, I would say. And therefore, they had to go from having several thousand people in an office to those several thousand people working from home. And the challenges you referred to before about, was there space, room in the house, was the broadband connection good enough? That has been a challenge. And I'm seeing some, these larger vendors are struggling a little bit because clients in Europe and the UK and the US are saying, well, actually, if you can't continue to support my required daily operations, I may need to consider bringing that work nearer to home, or even onshore again. So I wouldn't say there's a huge shift yet, but certainly that has been a challenge for some people because they weren't prepared for the speed at which they had to switch to work from home.
Thank you. Coming back to a point that I was making with Russell earlier about the experience of Polish tech companies coming to the UK, that one of the problems is not so much around language, but around culture, about the importance of building know, like, trust, and selling yourself, communicating effectively. I like the point that Angus was making about the importance of case studies and references, that when you are meeting a potential client as a Polish IT vendor, meeting a potential client in the UK, to have some kind of a game plan as to how that conversation is going, and not just, I can sell you technology, how much technology do you want? How many lines of code do you want? We can do it better and cheaper than anybody else, but there's a lot of learning, really. A part of it is about the sales model of IT. Talking to our members 2 weeks ago, we had our very first face-to-face mixer in Warsaw with all the right social distancing and precautions. But talking to our members across the board, one of the things that they were saying was that if you are a buyer, you are quite able in the world of COVID and lockdown to find what it is that you want to buy. But if you're a seller, you're finding yourself really hamstrung by your inability to make those new face-to-face contacts. Business development has really suffered. And being able to go out, find a potential client that may not be aware of you, because that's one of the first things that we were saying was, how do I find a company? So that matchmaking process, obviously this is an excellent tool that Tom has created here for matchmaking in the CEE IT space. But, you know, coming back to if we ever return to the real world, Russell, how do you see that process of business development working in an intercultural space?
Okay, so what we have to do is to change our mindset. So we have to change our mindset from adapting to what we did in the past to reassessing a fresh beginning. So I and the companies I'm involved with have closed more business with new clients in the last 4 months than in the previous couple of years, because it's never been easy to get to people, never been as easy to get to people, right?
Yeah.
So key decision makers are sitting home, plenty of time. So you have to change the mindset. So for example, if a Polish company wished to do business and decided the types of skills and technology we use, we've mapped what public information is available, and we've identified these 4 corporations in Scotland who we think we can sell to. So the traditional model of getting on a plane, flying over, making a meeting, worrying about how to communicate and how to react in culture, that's all gone. That world doesn't exist anymore. What you do is you identify a partner, a like-minded organization that can do all that for you. I personally will probably never attend another physical networking event, because they're so ineffective in comparison to this. This is, you know, I get a recording of this, I get a list of the people who attend, I can sit here and look at your LinkedIn profile while we speak. This is the future. So this is a transformation. Selling is going to return, I believe, a lot more to what it was before, which is relationship selling. So if a Polish company today, say historically, had looked to go on a trade mission to the UK, all they have to do today is to write to someone like myself, and we'll help them put on an event online for just about 0 cost, which will allow them to present what they want to the people they want to present it to. Because what we're looking for in the world today is solutions. We're not wanting for smart, clever sales techniques. What we're just looking for is trusted solutions, where the thing we buy for a fair price will do what we say. We have a hesitancy between cultures. So let's assume that I was going to take my technology company and go and hit the streets in Poland to do a deal. So for starters, I have to learn Polish. I then have to understand how culturally things are bought and sold in Poland. People in Poland would probably go, but you don't live here, Russell. We don't really want to work with you. And if you start seeing it from the other side of the table, it becomes quite obvious what to do. But we've got to get away from thinking about regional opportunities to global opportunities, because if I want to speak, a month ago when I spoke to my neighbour, I did it this way. I'm speaking to you this way, and I'll do a call tonight into Canberra this way. Distance has vanished. The single most important aspect is trust.
Yes.
So historically, trust would be based on geography. So I would trust Michael and Angus because I know them from an event. We're members of the same group and they live in the same town. So I have trust. So you now have to scramble the way you used to develop trust and develop new techniques. Because trust me, the opportunities at the present moment, particularly in the digital world, are almost at 1999 capacity at the moment. We're having to rewrite and reinvent and change everything. But you've got to be on the page to get the opportunity to take advantage of those. Now, as smaller companies, we can't compete with large brands and their spend and their positioning. But what we do know is that their account management approach is now broken, because their account managers can't pop into the office and go and have a meeting with someone. But we can work on different ways to make those relationships. I've built a community called Scottish Business Network to approximately 10,000 people across the globe. in 76 countries, and the thing they have in common is an interest in Scotland. It's a really simple concept, right? We stole it from the Irish because it saved making stuff up. So that's what they have in common. So if you're a Scottish company and you studied at Edinburgh University and you're trying to get into this company, and I know someone there who's also Scottish, they'll take the call. They won't hesitate to take the call because they'll be interested and they'd like to see success. And for countries like Poland and Ukraine, I did a project like Croatia's got a fantastic diaspora project running at the moment. So all I would say to everyone is you have to start thinking differently and identify the opportunity and ignore the geography. Just work out, can I take advantage of that, and work on mechanisms? Because I personally find it easier to develop trust in this mechanism than I do face-to-face. That's where I am today. This is quicker.
An interesting point, but we're coming back to, I mean, one of the things I've noticed since lockdown is that spam filters have been ratcheted up, and we're finding from our own membership network that invitations that people have asked for are not getting through because anti-spam filters like Sweeper are removing a lot of the emails that people otherwise would have got. So there is this still, you were saying that...
But Michael was aware round about that. So if I could just explain, because that was a problem I faced. So for the last 22 years, my single most important piece of technology in my life has been email. That's been that's my communication. That was my next step from the fax. In the last 18 months, social media communication has become way more important. So if I look at products like LinkedIn, because we three are on LinkedIn, we can send each other information without contravening anything like data protection rules. We can also communicate directly because we're both on the platform. So I would urge everyone to look at different ways to communicate out with email, because the one thing that's died in the last 4 months is email, because half the people in the UK were on furloughs who didn't have access to their work email anyway. Yes,
very interesting. Angus, you're nodding there and smiling. What's your take on this?
Look, I agree with Russell here that email as the sort of business communication mechanism, clearly hugely important. All the comments Russell made about moving to virtual networking and what have you, and there's a different way to build a relationship now. I would agree with Russell's comments that, look, in the last 6 months or so since the lockdown started in the UK, I find it easier to get into people's diaries. I find it easier to get meetings, and I find when I've had those meetings, it's been a much more even and relevant conversation. Because quite frankly, if nothing else, you both sat at home in your study, you could have some noise in the background. You could both be wearing a pair of shorts underneath your shirt. Who knows? It's just been a lot. It's been a lot easier, as I may be doing now. It's just been a lot easier conversation. So I think people have embraced technology and are happy to accept the fact that they can't do the good old handshake, because I think that's something at the moment, certainly, it's something that people just don't want to do. One of the other things I'm involved in, based out of Poland, is an event called Wolves Summit, where we have an investor and startup forum, which we were running twice a year, physically in person in Warsaw. The last one we did in person was about a year ago, last October. We had about 3,000 people come along for 2 days. We had 600 startups, about 1,000 investors, and other attendees. Great event. Jump forward to March this year, when we should be doing our sort of next one, if you like. Clearly, we couldn't do a large in-person, face-to-face event in Warsaw, so we had to switch to online with about a month's notice, which on day one of that month was quite daunting, I think, for all of us. But 28 days later, we delivered an online event with 2,000-3,000 attendees over 2 days, using Hopin platform as we're using now. And all Russell's comments about how people were actually, in a way, were getting more out of the pitch events we ran. So it was very strict 15 minutes investor startup pitch. What all the investors realized was there was no point them spending 5 minutes explaining who they were, what they were doing. They all realized, well, I'll email you my background, so you have 15 minutes to pitch to me online. You have 15 minutes to get your message. So a lot of investor feedback was the online matchmaking pitching contest was more effective because it was purely around the person selling his or her idea. So that was good. In terms of VIP networking, clearly important. The VIPs want to feel important at these type of events. So we did a virtual VIP session, and one of the ideas we had was to deliver each VIP a bottle of wine. So they then could sit in their own study with the bottle of wine we'd sent to them, and we did 3-minute networking sessions. So you got to meet 20 people over the hour, and you're all sat there with a bottle of wine that had been delivered. So in some ways, you can almost improve the user experience from virtual events, I would have to say. So what it's meant is we actually changed our business model because of technology changes. So we have now been running monthly online events as opposed to just twice a year. So I think it's still, there's many more things that people can embrace with the technology, and as people get more and more used to it, I just feel that trust, which I think in the first instance, if it's a cold relationship introduction, clearly it's helpful to have a face-to-face conversation, to shake a hand, to have a cup of coffee, have a glass of wine, have a beer, go for dinner. I think there will always be a place for that. It just will be done on a much more careful basis. That's all.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move to a completely different subject, which is about education and IT. Poland has traditionally done well in the PISA study that the OECD does of countries around the world looking at secondary school education. Poland again in the global top 10 then when it comes to maths and science. But then Polish universities are not so good. Last month we heard that University of Warsaw, Poland's best university, has slipped out of the global top 600 and is now 800 and something. One of the problems that Poland is facing really is with a sort of an aging cast of professors who are clinging on to their tenures. But in the world of IT, it sounds different. Universities that are offering IT courses tend to be gathering places for young people who have a desire to learn. And quite often, it's the students who know more than their lecturers. Certainly, when we're comparing Polish universities to British universities, where the global top 10, according to the Times Higher Education Supplement, 4 of them are British universities. The British higher education system clearly much better than the Polish one, but the Poles do inculcate a really strong sense of mathematics at that school level, high school level, which you can see in competitions like Top Coder, where high school students from Poland are consistently in the top 10 of the results. So I'd like to ask both of you this question about education, about preparing a country, an entire nation's educational system towards the needs of tomorrow, which will clearly be tech-focused, innovation-focused, and driven by IT. How do you see the challenges around education, and where do you see that the importance of education when it comes to recruiting IT staff? Who'd like to...
I'll go briefly because I'm aware I've only got perhaps 5 minutes left in the session. But going back to my Poland days when I worked for Credit Suisse, there we would hire IT people from 3 local universities in Wrocław. We targeted some of the Warsaw universities, and we targeted universities further afield. Generally speaking, you've got 2 million people in higher education in Poland. You have, getting over 1 million university students. You have, I forget the numbers now, but 100,000 plus tech graduates a year across the whole country. There's a reason why Poland's 2nd or 3rd largest industry now is outsourcing, because companies such as Credit Suisse and many others have realized that the talent is phenomenal. So there's been huge growth in the outsourcing business in Poland. Majority of that work is probably tech related, I would say. Speaking personally, we had close relationships with 3 local universities in Wrocław as a company. But building a relationship took time. That relationship was very important, because then what it also then meant over time was it had to be a two-way relationship between the company and the university. We could give input in terms of what we thought would be helpful from a course degree content point of view. So if you could perhaps think about including these 5 things in your technology degrees, 3-4 years time when they graduate, that actually would make them more employable. Some universities would listen to that, and others wouldn't.
Yes.
And all it ultimately meant was, in 3-4 years time, we would tend to go to the universities that listened, as opposed to those that didn't change their approach. Equally, from a company point of view, having a relationship with universities is very important, because a lot of Polish staff are very, very keen to get a set extra qualifications. So an MBA, a master's, MSc of some sort. Having that relationship with the universities, where obviously you've got access to the talent. The flip side was you could send your good staff to those universities to do part-time master's programs and what have you. So look, to be successful, I think it has to be a long-term commitment. There has to be commitment on both sides to make the relationship work. I think if a company purely just goes to universities, right, I want your best 5,000 IT people, it's very short term, honestly.
Okay, thank you. Russell, we've got 2 minutes left. If you'd like to add your closing thoughts about the importance of education and IT.
Yes, just to be practically benefit, just for anybody watching who's interested in the Scottish market, we have an event called Scottish International Week coming up in 2 weeks' time, and I'd be delighted to invite them as my guests. So just drop me a note. I sit on the board of, and also what a cool way to promote your event through this platform. I sit on the board of Edinburgh Napier University, and I've also done some work with Scotland's just published a new paper on ecosystems. So what we did was we looked at the great way Scottish universities and business integrate and how can we improve it. But what's really important is we got the previous COO of a company, Skyscanner, which was Scotland's first billion-dollar plus technology exit. So we got their COO to do the research work to see what needed to be done. And he identified the need for enhancements right through from secondary education to college and university. And now we're implementing that plan by initiating a number of new innovation hubs, but also improving this integration between the different organizations in Scotland to make better use of the talent we've got. But the biggest challenge of all is going to be this communicating with people globally. That's just, we've got to get better at that. And we're all going to have to work harder at that, because this world will change and continue to change and change again. But I think as technologists, it's to use the advantage that technology gives us to do that. And, you know, for countries, and particularly the final thing I would say is about Brexit and the opportunity that's likely to bring to countries right across Eastern and Southern Europe.